Good morning, good morning, good morning, and good whatever, good afternoon or evening or whatever it is where you are. We are here for day 9 of Larry Millete's preliminary hearing. They have already started providing the feed for us, so we're just now waiting for the things to get started. If I recall correctly, I keep saying Friday, yesterday ended with cross examination. Good morning, Green Eyes. Yesterday ended with cross examination of Detective Ruiz, who was talking about the Google searches and a variety of other things that had been investigated by the DA's office. Um, there's There was also Detective is it Grindley, who I believe was still on the stand when we stopped yesterday. And I think the prosecutor has more questions for him, and then it's going to go into the cross-examination of him. And he had some pretty explosive um, text messages and documentation going back and forth, but also some pretty explosive just kind of self-documentation by Maya, who was, had a private Instagram account where she said that she thinks that her husband is poisoning her. And then they showed evidence that Larry was looking up ways to drug her. He was looking up roofies, the, R drug. He was looking up ways to subliminally power her and, control her. And we do know for sure that she was caught him trying to subliminally control her, and that caused one of their big fights. I think it may have been what caused the fight in August of 2020 that where she said, "I'm done, I'm out of here." But things didn't really, really, really heat up until um, Larry reached out to Maya's boyfriend, I guess you could say, his wife, and created a work crisis, basically, where he was going to force another investigation into Maya's relationship with this coworker. So it was also confirmed that Maya was indeed having an affair, and but this gentleman has been questioned. He's still around. And it will be very interesting to see. Good morning, Betty. It will be very interesting to see what comes out of all of that. But I think the defense theory is that she ran off. Well, I know the defense theory that they're trying to hammer home is that she just disappeared. She just ran off. She just left everybody. But I think what the prosecutor is pretty credibly showing, convincingly showing, is that there's literally no trace of Maya after January 7th. And really the last digital thing, the last digital transaction by Maya was at 8:30 in the evening. She was like ordering something. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting exactly what the line item transaction was, but it was 8:30 that evening. It was something like something Amazon. I don't think it was to anybody. It was just a transaction. So we know that she was alive at, unless somebody else was using her computer, as late as 8:30 the night of January 7th. But then there's literally no trace of her whatsoever after that. And no trace of her phone, no trace of, not even any trace of anything she left behind in terms of forensic evidence. And that's what's going to be so difficult for the prosecutor, is that they still haven't found this poor woman. And as we're getting this hearing, as far as what the prosecutor has said, she has a couple of, yesterday was was really interesting, Green Eyes. The prosecutor I think she has a couple more witnesses. It's either this one and one last one, or two more after this. Really, the stretch of time, the length of time gets taken up by defense counsel because
the parties are present and the defendant is present, the witness is on the stand. You may continue with your.
All right, here we go.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Grinley, I think yesterday we left off and we were talking about some exhibits and evidence you obtained by way of an Apple search warrant. I want to ask you just a little bit of clarification with regard to kind of what these exhibits represent. What you'd mentioned an iCloud, and maybe you could just kind of describe how items end up being saved in an iCloud.
Sure. So depending on the user's settings within Apple, and specifically with iCloud information, if the setting is set to all or some of the material that is either such as an iMessage or photos or videos, application material can be sent automatically or saved within the iCloud storage service is essentially what that is. And that's how iCloud would retain the data. It's essentially it's a memory. So when we obtain a search warrant to request any and all or the specific types of account information, Apple would go to the user's iCloud account and pull whatever data is available.
So theoretically, could you get anything that was on someone's cell phone if they chose to have those items saved to their iCloud?
Yes.
And so the items of evidence that you received in the Apple search warrant are items of evidence that the user of Millete's cell phone saved to that iCloud account?
That's correct.
So I think yesterday we left off, you had discussed Courts Exhibit 19-3. Looking at Courts Exhibit 19-4, do you recognize what that exhibit is?
I do.
And what is that?
That is a screenshot that Millete had taken on her device and was then uploaded to the iCloud. And it is a image with appears to be a music track that is shown in the screen.
And is there a date and time attributed to that screenshot or when it was uploaded to the iCloud?
Yes, based on the information that was provided, the timestamp was October 25th, 2020 at 10:43 p.m.
And again, this exhibit has kind of a file path so that you could use that file path to locate where this image is in the Apple search warrant return.
Precisely.
Showing you, looks up on the screen, 19-4. Do you recognize that to be the same exhibit in the binder?
Yes, I do.
And is this the screenshot that you're referring to?
Yes.
And do you know what, can you tell us what this appears to be?
I could just read what it says,
Okay.
which is silent, sex drive, libido enhancer with my husband. Sex drive, libido enhancer with my husband. And it is a audio file that is approximately 20 minutes in length.
And the screenshot, however, doesn't have audio, right?
Correct.
Just a screenshot of what appears to be an audio file.
Just portraying it, yes.
Looking at 19-5, do you recognize this to be another screenshot with the same date with a time of 10:44 p.m.?
Yes, I do.
And is this also a screenshot that you located on that Apple search warrant return?
Yes, it is.
and again, attributed to the account maya.millet@yahoo.com.
Correct.
And can you tell us what this screenshot is of?
The screenshot appears to be taken from May's device, taking of another device. As you see the term My Library at the top, it has the date and time listed on the right side, the left side of the screen on the actual screenshot. And it shows a number of audio tracks, I believe to be audio tracks, on the left side of the page going down the screen.
Some of them are Love Your Husband and Children, Millete Family, My Husband Larry, No More
So these
Men,
are the subliminal
Blessed Family Life.
messages, and one of them was about
Yes.
enhancing her libido with her husband.
Looking at 19-6, do you recognize this screenshot?
Yes, I do.
And this has a date of 10/25/2020 and a time of 10:15 p.m. Is that the date and time attributed to the screenshot?
That's correct.
And tell us why it is that you noted this particular screenshot.
It just showed more of kind of what May was dealing with, or at least the conversations between her and Larry. This appears to be a screenshot taken on May's phone, and it just shows May's messages in blue and Larry's messages that are in black.
And just kind of the first one, for the record, I saw some liquid on the wall again and wiped it off, and again on the wall post where I sleep. Second message, and the stupid subliminal messages things you're doing need to stop. It's annoying. And this is an accurate screenshot of what you found on the Apple search warrant return.
Yes.
Looking at 19-7, date of 10/25/2020, time of 10:51 p.m. Do you recognize this to be another screenshot, kind of continuation, or another screenshot of communication between Larry and May?
Yes.
And what was significant to you about this particular screenshot, or can you?
Well, to elaborate, it shows more of just the communication or the frustration that May was pouring out to Larry, of just the things that she was alleging he was doing and advising him to stop.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what
In the
was
middle
strange.
message, she says you're just aggravating the situation more,
Correct.
doing things you want to do, even though I've told you not once but many times that I don't want to be exposed to all
Good
that
morning.
pheromones, raw subliminal messages, etc., etc.
Yes.
If one more time playing on your phone or iPad, I do not want to be in the same space as you. Either you give me my own room and you do not invade it, or I move out. It's not a threat. Stop thinking these things you're doing are okay. They're not.
That's correct.
And again, the file path.
Well, good for her.
Where this
She knew.
screenshot could be located on the Apple return is up in the right hand corner.
She knew.
That's
he was
correct.
fucked up.
Yes.
I'm going to skip ahead to 19-9 with a date of 12/18/2020, 10:36 a.m. You recognize up on the screen to be another, looks like photograph of a device. Can you tell us what this is?
Yes, this is an image that was on May's account showing a screenshot that was taken December 18th, 2020. And it's reflective on the screen actually itself, showing 10:36, being a Friday, December 18th, 2020. It's showing another track in the
No more
same
men.
fashion that I previously testified on, and also shows two more notifications that are showing up, and it even identifies the device as iPad.
And what does that mean?
What that means is that, and I'm looking at the settings notification, is that confirm iPad passcode. So in theory, it would be if May had her device and she had the iPad in front of her, she would take a screenshot of the iPad with the screen illuminated.
So is what you're saying, the screenshot that we're looking at, Silent No More Men, was on an iPad?
Correct.
And 19-9 up on the screen is the same exhibit in the binder?
That's correct.
And then 19-10, can you tell us what this is? Is this how this exhibit was created?
So with reviewing and conducting the analysis on the return, the Apple return for May Millete's account information, I created a chart in similar fashion as I did for other reports, showing the file title on the left side of the column and the timestamp that the image was obtained.
And again, is this something you did just because it's analyzing the Apple warrant return can be kind of more difficult to, I guess that's the right word, kind of make sense of, or
Yes, it's more for my own methodology, if you will, or understanding, so that when I have to reflect on this report, I understand exactly this is the information I reviewed, put it into my own format so that I could then either re-ingest it back into the return or at least testify to it.
and
Thanks for saying hi,
so you
Leslie.
can document exactly where these images were, how they were labeled, and the date and timestamp and local time of those images.
Exactly.
And then looking at 19-11, dated January 6, 2021, 3:45 p.m. Do you see that up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And you recognize that to be the same exhibit in the binder?
Yes.
This was an image you have dated January 6, 2021 at 3:45 p.m. How do you locate that date and time?
The date and time with the file name, IMG_2290, that attributed with that specific file name is also a timestamp. So I'm really just regurgitating what's on the file and putting it at the top of this exhibit to show the timestamp.
And what is it a photo of?
It is a photo of a wall that has been patched over. You can tell by the difference in paint color. So it's been adjusted, or at least something has happened to where now it's being patched.
19-12, can you tell us, first of all, is this the exhibit up on the screen, the same exhibit in the binder?
Yes, it is.
What are we looking at?
We're looking at a door, and this was an image that was obtained on May's account, January 6th, approximately a minute later from the previous slide. And it's showing another patch on the door. That's essentially the putty, or at least the difference in door color versus the molding that's on the door.
And just to be clear, the date and timestamp, is that the date and timestamp that the photo was taken, or when the photo was uploaded to the iPad?
It's when the photo was captured, so when it was taken.
And then looking at 19-13, 19-14, and 19-15, those appear to be all three photos that are similar, taken January 7th, 2021 at 6:04 and 6:05 p.m. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what are these three particular exhibits? What are they showing? And I'll start with 1913 up on the screen.
So 1913 is showing a portfolio of an account. And I recognize this from other pieces of the investigation to be associated with a cryptocurrency application. And it's showing an account balance. You will see at the top that there's a time of 9:16 a.m. on the actual image itself. So my understanding is that it would have been captured prior to and then uploaded again to the iCloud account.
So that the photo would have been taken at 9:16 a.m. on some particular day, but was uploaded January 7th at 6:04.
That's correct.
And do you believe that both images are from May's phone?
Yes, based on the Apple ID association to the account is the same.
Well, and just to be clear, you said both images. Are there two images?
I guess, could you rephrase the question?
Yes, well, I'm sorry that Your Honor had said, referred to both images in the exhibit, and
Oh, yes.
I just
So,
wanted to see if you could clarify that.
yeah, so to clarify, a screenshot was obtained on, I'm not sure what date, but it was showing a time of 9:16 a.m. The same image would have then been uploaded or at least screenshot again. So it could have been the photo was taken and then a second screenshot was performed on January 7th, 2021 at 6:04 p.m. And that is what is reflective in this exhibit.
So if I took a photo, for example, on my phone of the face of a cell phone that had a time on it, and then later took a screenshot of that image, I'd have two different times.
Correct.
The time the actual photo was taken and the time the screenshot was taken.
That's correct.
And then looking at 19-14, again, same image up on the screen that you see in the exhibit book.
Yes, it is.
And 1914 and 1915, what are both of those exhibits?
They're showing, again, the same portfolio or account balance of a cryptocurrency account that has been, original photo was taken, then it was screenshot, and the screenshot is what's reflective of January 7th, 6:05 p.m.
And then looking at 19-15 again, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at a market portfolio showing things that essentially items that are consistent with being cryptocurrency, showing the charts, and that information was, again, the original file would have been taken a separate day, but then the screenshot was what's reflective of this capture.
Okay. And so it says BTC USD. Can you decipher what kind of this screenshot is depicting?
So BTC is the acronym for Bitcoin and United States dollar or US currency.
And so this screenshot, this is reflecting essentially the value of Bitcoin currency to US dollars?
Yes.
Did you also locate a video that was of some significance to you in the Apple search return?
I did.
And have you reviewed that video prior to testifying today?
Yes, I have.
And may I approach the witness?
Yes.
And I'm providing a copy of the transcript to counsel. Provided you with 41-A, which is a copy of a transcript, and Courts Exhibit 41, which is a CD, or actually a DVD-R. Do you recognize what that DVD is?
Yes, I do.
And what is that DVD?
That is a file in the form of a video that was recovered from Millete's Apple iCloud account that was viewable. And I previously reviewed this disc.
And did you review the disc, the video? The video had a transcription embedded into the video.
That's correct.
And was the transcription accurate?
Yes, it is.
And I believe counsel would stipulate that I do not need to play the actual disc, but I'm going to be playing a copy of the disc that's uploaded to the iPad. Your Honor,
All right, so noted. And there's audio.
correct.
There is, yeah.
There's audio. There's a transcript that has been embedded essentially into the audio. A copy of that transcript has been marked as 41-A.
And former court reporter.
Oh, and I will stipulate that she does not need to transcribe the audio in the video.
It's stipulated, yeah.
So noted for the record. Now, the transcription that's embedded in the video,
Yes,
How-
Liz, nothing
how
is
was that
supposed to be a surprise to either party.
That was produced using our office's technology unit or technical unit that reviewed the video and then transcribed what was being said.
I don't know if you heard me say that, Liz, but both sides are supposed to submit all their evidence. Nothing is supposed to be a surprise, even the witnesses. Yeah, I agree. This is all embarrassing.
He's been trying to court you the whole time. He's been trying the pictures from your thing, you know, you guys got really close together on your desk, always right here, always together, you know, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And then you start feeling stuff.
So that's enough for you to wish death on me all the time?
Oh, that's enough that, you know, that you gradually had an affair since December, and he probably, whenever he got hired or whatever, and you got close to him, oh, he's cute and all that stuff. You're probably the one that hired him. You know, you interviewed him.
Seriously?
You interviewed him.
I did not interview.
You know what I mean? To get into your team or whatever.
Really?
I don't
Really?
know. I don't know.
Oh, God.
What you guys are doing, so 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night all the time, and your projects and your team projects, mentoring
So
and all that
you
stuff.
after all this stuff that you're accusing me of, and
Mentoring.
this is exactly why
This is
and
like the
then
mentoring stuff.
this is you said this wasn't gonna happen
No,
and it still happened.
no, but
And then
the
you
thing
see
is,
you bring it up every
your,
day.
your thing is like,
Every day you do
it
this.
was
Every
never a
day
thing.
you do this.
it's, you always like, oh, it was the thing. But no, it was gradual. You guys, he was going for you already. He was going for you. Because he wasn't happy with this thing, he was going for you. You didn't even see it. You didn't even see it. He was trying to hold you the whole time. You didn't even see it. You know what I'm saying? You didn't see it coming.
What's your point? I'm asking you why you would say stuff like that and then you go there and then you want to be together.
Wow, that was tough to hear.
Investigator Grinley, there was a date and timestamp at the beginning of that exhibit. Do you recall what the date and timestamp was of that video?
October 30th, 2020 at 9:47 a.m.
And that date and timestamp is reflective of what in terms of your search warrant returns and your findings?
Two things. First, it's in local time zone to San Diego. And secondly, it was a movie that was uploaded into the iCloud service. So it was a setting that was activated on May's account to where it would retain that information.
Did you also, in your investigation, review May's work emails that were provided to the investigation from NCIS?
Yes.
And did you locate anything, a particular email of interest sent to her by Terry Fonville?
I did.
And when was that email sent?
January 8th, 2021 at 11:46 a.m. local time.
If you could turn to exhibit 15 in the binder.
Sure.
Terry Fonville
and
is
take a look
very
at that
soft.
exhibit and tell us if you recognize it.
Yes, I do.
What is that exhibit?
This is the original email that Terry Fonville had sent to May Millete.
And again, the date is January 8th, 2021 at 11:45 a.m.
Correct.
this was from Terry Fonville. Who again was Terry Fonville?
Terry Fonville is Larry Millete's work supervisor.
And this was sent from his military account to May's Navy.mil account.
That's correct.
And if you could just read the substance of that email.
Good morning, May. Sorry to bother you, but I am concerned because I have not heard from him. This is not like him to miss work. It has been a few days. V/R Terry D. Fonville.
And what was significant to you about that particular email?
What was significant to me is that Terry did not know where Larry was. Terry had been trying to get in contact with Larry and had not heard a response. So he was reaching out to May in hopes of getting a hold of Larry.
And in your review of communications, either text message or phone, did it appear that there were others trying to get in touch with Larry on January 8th who could not?
Yes, there were.
Can we back up a little bit? Did you cover how this witness knows that Terry was calling the defendant? Did we cover that? Because he said Terry hadn't been able to contact the defendant.
Yes, he
Oh.
testified
And I
about
wonder
that
if
yesterday.
That's not an evidence, or if I just missed it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Do you know whether or not Terry Fonville was trying to contact the defendant on January 8th?
Through text messages, yes.
And tell us about that. How do you know that?
In review of the text message content that was provided by T-Mobile and looking specifically at the text messages between Terry Fonville and Larry Millete, Terry, by the substance of the content, Terry was trying to get a hold of Larry, or at least having Larry contact him on January 7th and then again on January 9th.
Did Terry Fonville try to contact Larry Millete by text message on January 8th?
Not on January 8th.
Did Terry Fonville, in your review of cell phone records, attempt to call Larry Millete on January 8th?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I have no other questions.
All right, cross-examination.
All right, brace yourselves. It's Bo Lane time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
During your work on this case, did you have available to you the cell phone that belongs to Miss Millete?
Miss Millete?
Yes.
No, that phone has not been recovered.
Did you determine when it was lost?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustained, rephrase.
Was the cell phone originally in Miss Millete's home, if you can determine that from your investigation?
Based on the habits of the device, is that one of the last known locations, or the last known location was either at or near her residence.
All right,
And what date was that?
And I'm sorry, what are you basing that on? You're going to have another witness who's going to talk about the cell phone data.
Yes.
Right? Is this witness qualified to?
He is, but I don't know that it was his primary focus for purposes of this testimony. But I mean, he's qualified definitely. But I do have Peter Billiver, who is specifically going to testify to the analysis of the cell phone and cells, in particular, cell site determinations.
Sorry for interrupting. You can rephrase.
Okay.
You can ask your question.
Thank you, Yana. To your knowledge, Maya Milete's cell phone was not inside her home on or about January the 8th, 2021.
That's a good point, Amelia.
I cannot say yes and I cannot say no without
Why is
having, because I did not have direct observation of that cell phone.
Is there anything in your knowledge with the technology that you have experienced and learned? Would there be a device in order to discover that?
I'm not understanding your question, ma'am.
Based on the current technology, is there any possibility of determining whether Ms. Milete's phone was located in the house before you worked on this information, the cell site?
So she's fishing again for
There's
discovery.
different resources within the technology field that could assist in determining to locate a device if it was on.
Oh, I see. And if the battery is dead, it would be impossible.
Objection made as to it.
Do you understand the question?
I understand it to a certain degree, sir.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. You can be a little bit more specific.
Okay. If Miss Milete's phone was dead, would the technology still be able to determine its location?
Depends on the version of the particular device. Some devices are still can ping locations depending on the version of the phone. So it's a tough question to answer because there's so many different factors. With Miss Millete's phone, that's undetermined.
Based on your knowledge and experience, is it possible to determine if this cell phone
That's why I said brace
can
yourself.
verify if a person is carrying it versus for the cell phone just sitting on a table?
Generally, no.
You know the model iPhone that she had?
Sir, it's an Apple iPhone 11 Pro.
Nice phone.
If you know when a cell phone is purchased and created, can you buy a cell phone that already has the Yahoo or apps in the cell phone, or do you have to create that?
You would have to download the application, the mobile application, with respect to the different platform. If you had an Android, if you had an Apple device, you would go to the iOS store. But you would have to physically download that application upon activating that phone.
Can somebody hack the cell phone to obtain those apps?
I'm sure it's possible.
You talked about Ms. Millete's Instagram accounts as Instagram 1 and Instagram 2. Can you distinguish which is 1 and 2 when you're providing the codes, the password, and the codes?
I didn't provide any passwords on the account. I'm not sure what May's password to get into the account was. I can tell you that the Instagram one would have been her main account that Detective MacGyver from the Chula Vista Police Department had obtained records for. Instagram 2 is in reference to the Sailor Moon account. So that's the distinguish between both.
If Mr.
Morning, Marie.
Larry Millete wanted to join in the Instagram one, what would he need in order to join in that account?
To join in the account, if it was still active and the account user was still using it, and he did not have the device in hand, and he was trying to get access to the account, he would need to either follow the original account holder or request to be added to the account. And the user would have to accept, or at least accept that as a to be followed.
For a husband and wife to be joined on a single account, do they need to open the account together?
It depends on the settings. It could go both ways, but generally not, especially if it's device specific,
No.
because the applications can recognize the device. And so if the device is activated on, let's say, on May's Apple iPhone 11, and Larry is trying to access the account from his Apple iPhone SE, first generation from 2016, there will be some suspicious activity, or at least Meta Platforms, who is ran by Facebook and Instagram, would note that there's an event that's being created. So without May having the device in Larry's hand, otherwise it'd be like some sort of suspicious activity, at least get reported.
Are suspicious activities monitored by the server?
Yes, each platform, and when I say platform, I'm talking about Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, they all have their law enforcement response team that not only tailors to producing search warrants, records upon request, but also monitoring the accounts for suspicious activities such as login information, logons or attempt to sign on, as well as crimes that are need to be acted upon immediately, such as child exploitation, human trafficking, such as that.
We talked about suspicious activities in Ms. Milete's account. Was that suspicious activity monitored or reported?
Yes, it was reported in the form that May had received emails from the different platforms, such as Amazon, PayPal, and Facebook, to name a few, that had sent the email letting her know that somebody was trying to access the account.
Would there be a penalty for that?
As in a violation?
Sustain.
I'm just referring to the provider. Would the provider stop the service?
Well, in regard to PayPal, they had frozen the account because of the suspicious activity. So yes, there's a penalty in the form that which goes against the account user, because now they cannot use their own account because someone has tried to access the account, which then causes the activity to be ceased.
When Miss Millete was still around living with her husband, was there any suspicious activities in 2020?
In regards to what?
To any activities in her accounts?
As in suspicious
Usage?
in the same emails?
Yes.
I didn't find any. I did not see any suspicious sign-ons, suspicious login information, password changes, other than some that have already been testified to. But the majority, or in fact, all of the suspicious activity occurred, and I'm looking at the Yahoo return, is January 26th through April 1st of 2021.
So if Mr. Millete wanted to get into Miss Millete's Instagram too, he will not be able to do that unless Miss Millete will provide the codes to him.
No, that's not correct.
So Mr. Millete can in fact get into Miss Millete's Instagram account too.
What I'm saying is that there's no code that's provided.
Okay.
So she would have to follow him, or she would have to agree to be followed. Is basically how that, to simplify it, is really that's the transaction that would have to take place.
Can you stop someone from following you?
You can.
And initially, do you need
You can
to
block them.
allow them access?
No, you don't need to have, if the account is set to where it's private versus if it was public. So if you have Instagram, for instance, and you could pull up anyone's Instagram profile that was public, you would see literally their activity on their account for public view. However, if the account is set to private, which Sailor Moon was, you would not see any of that information. So you'd have to really get access to the account by the user allowing you to join.
Either by maybe following you or giving you the email address or the Instagram.
It would be, if we're looking at device to device, Instagram usually uses both the computer and the device, but mainly it's device based because of taking pictures, activity. People use it on their phones when they're in transit versus at a house, for instance. Because of that feature and because of the application, how it's designed, you would need to have been followed or at least request to be followed. And the user, on the other hand, would have to accept it or at least show that you're trying to get into their private account. If it's public, you don't really get that access because anybody can see it.
There has been allegations in this case that Mr. Millete has been blocking certain friends of Miss Millete from Facebook. How would Mr. Millete do that? If he can.
Did this witness cover that on direct?
He discussed her Facebook account to some degree. I'm certain he's able to answer it.
That's fine. Please, if it's outside the scope, free to object. You can answer.
Are you referring to Larry Millete's Facebook account? Or
Miss
Millete?
Miss Millete's Facebook account.
Okay. I just want to understand what you're asking is Mr. Millete was saying that he was having to block May's friends.
Larry May was
Certain
saying Larry
friends of Miss Millete,
We're trying to contact Larry.
I know, making allegations that they couldn't get hold of Miss Millete because Mr. Millete blocked them.
I'll object at this point. They're relevant to beyond the scope and lack of foundation.
Sustain.
there was a message from Maya saying that Larry was blocking his friend, her friends.
When you talked about the suspicious activity that was noted between January 26th and April 1st, 2021, did you determine who was attempting to log on to those accounts?
I previously testified not on every platform. However, there were some emails from the different providers that did say an email address that we had determined was Larry Millete and a phone number that we had determined to be Larry Millete had tried to access the account between that time period.
That's right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You testified about Mr. Fonville's conversation with Mr. Millete. Did you also interview Mr. Fonville personally?
I did.
Is it true that Mr. Fonville told you that Mr. Millete's work schedule is flexible?
Yes, at one point he did describe that Larry has an alternate work schedule, is how he phrased it.
And that actually Larry was given a time off on January the 8th as well as January the 11th, 2021.
Morning, Jana.
Time off, or
You can rephrase that question to ask if Mr. Fonville told him a certain thing. Otherwise, it's vague and may lack foundation.
Did Mr. Fonville tell you that Larry was off on was given days off on January 8th and January 11th, 2021?
when I spoke to Mr. Fonville,
Yes.
the term of given time off was never used. It was Larry didn't show up for work. And that was the change.
In other words, Larry's a liar.
When you say that my cell phone's last ping was on January the 8th, 2021 at around 1:24 a.m. in San Miguel Ranch neighborhood. What does it really mean when you say ping?
I
Did
don't-
you use that term?
I did not, sir. I did not recall saying anything to the effect of San Miguel Ranch.
All right, so you're misstating the witness's testimony. He talked about I forgot the term. There were two terms he used,
Okay.
but ping was not one of them.
Okay, so your testimony is Ms. Millete's cell phone stopped or was no longer active on January 8, 2021, around 1:24 a.m. Does that mean that you couldn't text or you cannot contact her at all, or you can still text?
Again, I reviewed the official records that were submitted by T-Mobile. These are data transactions. These are call detail records, so phone calls and text messages. And again, I previously testified on one file contains calls made or received, text messages sent or received, data sessions, which encompasses timing advance data sessions in general, applications being used, emails, push notifications, anything outside of calls made or texts. So on the data session, that was the last contact, was at 1:25 or approximately 1:25 in the morning, January 8, 2021. Between the two files and anything else I've reviewed in this investigation for that number for May Millete, there has been no additional activity to this day.
Could you determine the cause of non-activity because it's related to it has not been or the battery is dead?
That's vague. Rephrase.
Or the service is actually terminated?
Counsel,
Okay,
you can ask the question, but it needs to be one sentence, not compound.
sorry, Your Honor. given the termination of Ms. Millete's cell phone usage, does it mean that it was just a dead battery?
I previously testified there's different options that could occur.
She could have asked that a lot.
Without being directly present into what I directly observed or had seen for my own self, the options are battery could die, phone could be destroyed, or the phone could be turned off. I cannot tell you that it is the battery, nor can I tell you it was destroyed because I wasn't there. But I can. Those are generally based on my training experience in this profession. Those are the three main issues. That's all I can provide for you on that.
If the battery is dead, can you still determine the cell site information?
Again, it's with a newer iPhone, which is at the time of this investigation, did not have that capability.
I think she's in over her head with this particular witness.
You also were able to look at information that was downloaded from Mr. Millete's cell phone dated January 9, 2021.
That's incorrect. The cell phone was downloaded January 13th of
Okay.
2021.
And there were certain activities from Mr. Millete trying to contact Mrs. Millete.
On which day?
On or about January 9, 2021, at 8:56 a.m., Mr. Millete was trying to, there was an SMS message from Mr. Millete to Mrs. Millete regarding an inquiry whether they were still going to go to Big Bear. You recall that one?
I'd like to clarify. There was nothing on the cell phone download that reflected any of that information. I do agree with what you say, that it is from the T-Mobile SMS content that was provided upon search warrant. So we did not find anything on the actual device
Was.
that reflected that.
All right. So if I looked at the actual device, I will not see that.
Correct.
So does that mean one option is it was erased on the device? Deleted?
In my opinion, yes.
So if, in this case, there was a witness who claimed that Maya Millete was at a hotel in Las Vegas and asked this witness to call a certain number with a 619 area code, and then left the hotel in Las Vegas, how long will that telephone number stay in his cell phone?
Objection lacks foundation, speculation beyond scope.
Where'd that come from?
Sustained on all three grounds. It was Detective Vicente who talked about that investigation.
Okay.
This witness did not cover that during his testimony.
I was just trying the capability of the technology. I wasn't going to ask him specifically what he knows about that. Just whether, in fact, if a certain, whether in
I
fact,
understand,
yeah,
I've made my ruling, and
okay,
this isn't the witness it has.
all right, thank you.
And the purpose of the preliminary hearing is not to engage in general discussion.
Okay.
When when the judge says this isn't where you do engage in discovery, he's basically saying you're on a
As it relates to the searches and the visits that you testified earlier regarding Mr. Millete's activity, searching for
yay
some
%.
drugs related to sedatives, you recall that?
I do, yes.
Okay. Were you able to determine whether those drugs or any of those drugs that he searched were purchased by him?
I did not
Now that is the question.
have access to that part of the investigation, so I could not. I don't think I'm the person to explain that.
You also don't have the information why he was searching for those drugs, right?
I do not understand your question, ma'am.
You don't know what reasons did Mr. Millete have why he was searching information for those sedatives.
Without speculating, no, I do not.
Was he trying to roofie himself? Is that the theory here?
You also would not know what Mr. Millete meant when he said, I am going to lose it.
Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
You also don't have personal knowledge if it was true that Mr. Millete was poisoning Mrs. Millete.
Same objection.
We can answer. Overall.
It's difficult to respond. And the reason I say is it's not a question, it's a statement.
Do you have knowledge that Mr. Millete is poisoning or was poisoning Miss Millete?
Well, from May's Instagram account, she had, this is the account that she used as a diary and a place to vent, but also her safe haven, is that she had actually taken pictures of herself, and she had also had conversations telling Larry to stop giving her medications or gummies, for instance, that were making her drowsy. So although I cannot
Thanks for
factually say he was poisoning her, I can rely on the confessions, if you will, or the information that May was providing or uploading to her own Instagram account about these conversations.
So independent of what Miss Millete had written on her Instagram, you don't have any knowledge that Mr. Millete was actually poisoning Mrs. Millete.
That question has been asked and answered.
Thank you. You talked about the subliminal messages that Miss Millete was discussing on her Facebook, I believe.
No, it was not Facebook. It would have been recovered from the Apple iCloud return. So it was screenshots about her. Yes, it was about her
Yes, so-
text messages with Larry.
Can you determine how many people did she send a screenshot? Is it even possible to send a screenshot to numerous individuals?
Yes.
Isn't it true that Mr. Fonville told you that he did not believe Larry was capable of killing May?
Objection, relevance, calls for speculation.
Those two grounds would do.
That was one of those trying to throw a punch type questions.
Do you remember Mr. Fonville telling you that Larry would look after the kids, make Maya's dinner, and bring it to her?
Objection, calls for hearsay, double hearsay. Lack of foundation.
Lack of foundation, relevance, and sustain.
During your interview of Mr. Fonville, did he tell you that Larry look after the kids, make up Maya's dinner as well?
Objection, relevance, lack of foundation, calls for hearsay.
I'll sustain it. Same grounds. I'll leave on.
This isn't what this detective testified to.
Did Mr. Fonville tell you that he believed Maya had been kidnapped?
Objection, calls for speculation, relevance.
Sustain.
You are aware that Mr. Millete had been receiving death threats, right?
What's the relevance of that question with this witness? Hearing no response, the objection is sustained for relevance.
Totally agree.
When you looked at the subliminal messages in this case, did you find any message wherein Mr. Millete suggested harm to Mrs. Millete?
Just within subliminal messages?
Right.
The act of it, the
No.
act in and of itself is harmful.
You talked about a specific drug that Mr. Millete was searching in the, I believe, Google. Rofino, something like that. I don't know if that's correct. Rofino.
That would be pronounced Rohypnol.
Were you able to verify if that drug is manufactured or available in the United States?
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
And lack of foundation.
Oh, Cinnamon Bear. We've been calling, I don't know if you watched the Depp trial, but we've been calling her Bo Lane because her name is Bonita, but she's like Elaine from the Depp trial. Hey, Lori. Hey, Jay Friday.
I'll call your attention to the, I believe you talked to I believe this is a Instagram message from May Millete. I believe it's in a diary form, where she said, that all she wanted to do is to be done away from Larry.
Is that a question? Are you? So it's vague. Do you have a question at the end of that phrase? Are you asking if he recalls reading that?
Hear how the judge
Yes,
has
or
to
do you
coach
recall
her
that?
and tell her she has to ask a question?
It's supposed to be one of
No, I'm asking, do you
I'm sorry.
recall that?
Your Honor, it's tough to distinguish because it's listed in different formats. Are we referring to the screenshots of the communications between Larry and May, or are we talking about the messages between Jamie and May? That's what I'm not understanding.
Okay. From your investigation and examination of Ms. Millete's activities during that period of time, did she just send messages to her Instagram or diary? Like just type the information and send it to her Instagram diary?
That's vague.
Did you see how the detective just put his head down?
What was the procedure that Ms. Millete followed to provide information to her, what you said, code diary?
I'm not understanding the question.
When Ms. Millete wants to write something in her diary, how did she accomplish that?
Objection. Misstates testimony, lack foundation, and vague.
Overruled, you can answer it.
So the term diary is something that I used specifically, the term diary. Instagram does not have the term diary, but based on my review of the account, it was again something that she would send. So yes, she would send messages to her account, but didn't expect a reply from anyone. So with messages that were sent, either in direct messages or text format, which could contain an image describing how she was feeling, describing her environment. Yes, there were some messages in there.
And she'd be basically getting her phone and texting it or typing it on her phone.
Yes, she would have to be on the Instagram application and she could send that information to herself. She would post it, but she wouldn't post it to anyone. It would just be to herself. So the term diary, again, is something that I relate it to.
Would that be something that after she types it, will it be deposited in a certain account where she can retrieve it and print it?
Yes, I mean, that's her account. So she would be able to view her account and what she posted historically. She would be able to download a report of her account if she wanted to go that far. And yes, so she would be able to print it if need be.
And she could send that message directly to another person
If she wanted to.
if she wanted to, yes.
Yes.
I just wanted, because it's a diary, I thought it might be limited or restricted.
I understand.
I want to give credit to whoever came up with Bolane. Was it Betty? Was it Liz Stewart? I'm trying to remember who came up with Bolane. If you're in the chat, make yourself known. Also, if you remember who it was. My memory can be like Swiss cheese sometimes.
Based on what you reviewed, were there any indications to to May that on January 7, 2021, her life was in danger.
Yes.
Yep. So
Can you tell us which information did she have to believe that?
That was based on the direct communications between Jamie and May, where Jamie had reached out to her multiple times saying that he was worried about her safety. So other people or another person, based on perspective, could see that in terms of Larry's behavior, controlling behavior, obsessiveness, the other information about the dramatic conversation that occurred on January 5th to leading up to her disappearance, Jamie was able to see that her life, or at least the environment she was in, was no longer safe, even though May may not have seen it herself.
Well, get
Is
that
it
man on.
fair to say that Jamie was worried about May's life?
And
I would
I mean, it's
calls for speculation, but
doesn't hurt your case, but it's speculative. I can't allow testimony about what someone else thinks.
Based on what you read in this case, do you believe Jamie and May had a plan to make sure that May was safe?
Relevance. So, next question.
I love how the detective got
Is it
how
true that Miss Millete
controlling.
wanted to leave? In those writings and messaging that she has done, many times she told Jamie she wanted to leave. Mr. Millete.
I can only relate or provide you from what I read directly from the messages. I cannot speculate on what her intention was. But when saying that, she wanted to leave Larry. She did not want to leave her kids. She did not want to leave her life that she had built, but she wanted to leave Larry.
Boom.
I cannot testify to anything else.
Yeah, he's been a powerful witness, I think. And I agree. Yesterday I picked up that he has, like you say, Northeastern or Boston or something like that kind of accent, because whenever his R's or ahs, he pops the cough.
Did you interview any of the spellcasters?
judge to be on the scope.
Did you mention that at all during your testimony?
I did not, Your Honor.
Her name is Bonita Hernandez. Martinez. Bonita Martinez.
Did you interview Ms. Millete regarding the spellcasters?
Did I interview Larry Millete?
Yes.
I attempted to on the day of his arrest on October 19th, 2021.
Objection, relevance, and
Sustain. You know the discovery better than I do, so that objection is sustained. And back by saying, you know the discovery better than I do.
I didn't say
I've read the arrest warrant, some search warrants. I don't have the police reports, so I don't know all the facts of the investigation.
Your witness.
Sidebar, unreported. I have a question regarding procedure.
Okay, I wonder if they're going to do the same kind of sidebar as they did yesterday, where they did this sidebar. He is very smart and handsome, Violet. They called a sidebar and they did a sidebar for a few minutes, and then they came back in the courtroom and they sat down, and then they just sat there silently for about like, a minute, and then they all said break. And yeah, Judge is not happy. Judge is I mean, if Bonita was a little more experienced in criminal law, criminal defense, we would have been out of here by now. This preliminary hearing would have been done. Her questions, she wouldn't have had to have been, I would say every other question, she has to be coached about whether that's even a proper kind of question. That's what I thought, Betty Castle. I thought it was you. I wanted to give you, so Betty Castle is the one who came up with Boleyn. And it's funny. So good job. You get a prize. Yeah. So anyway, every other question, hold on. Every other question, she's having to be coached, told it's not an improper, told it's out of scope, told that it has to be asked differently. It's just been crazy. Cinnamon Bear, can a judge do something if he thinks she is ineffective? I don't think so. I don't think the judge can do anything. I think someone has, really, judges are there to help make legal decisions, run the courtroom, make decisions of fact, unless there's a jury, and then the jury makes the decision of fact. And so someone would have to come to, bring some sort of legal action saying, she's ineffective. And if we take this down the line, it's very possible that Larry, if he gets convicted, will try to appeal on ineffective assistance of counsel. That's where that could come in. And that's something, I don't know if any of you followed the Adnan Syed case, which is the one that was made famous by Serial. But he had a very, very ineffective public defender. And she was a private attorney, but she left out some things that she did not investigate, some things that could have led to his exoneration, and she didn't include them. So they tried to appeal on that, and it was eventually a technicality and a new law that freed Adnan Syed. But anyway, yes, Lori, Boleyn said your witness at the end. So she was basically turning it back over to the prosecution for redirect. So we'll see what happens from there. They're probably going to take their break after this sidebar.
So I wanted you to clear up.
Oh, here they come again. Let's see what they say.
History of text messages and whether there was any other evidence of motive or intent. So that's what we covered.
And Investigator Brinley, when you had mentioned that you examined the defendant's cell phone download from January 13th, correct?
Correct.
And you examined the SMS messages that were obtained from T-Mobile that you obtained via search warrant, correct?
That's correct.
Can you, and I think you mentioned yesterday on direct examination that there were some text messages that you did observe in some location that were from June of 2020 between May and Larry. Can you first explain where you saw those messages?
So those messages were from the from the device download to where we could export the text message data and then be able to view them independently. So going back to June of 2020 was the last time that I observed text messages that involved both Larry's phone number and May's phone number, and it was in the form of a group message. So there was another party that was involved in this group message.
Do you recall who that other person was?
Not specifically, but it was in the form of they were scheduling an appointment or at least a conference, but I cannot accurately testify to that today.
Was there anything about, I guess, a significant evidentiary value of the substance of those messages versus more innocuous, just messaging about some type of scheduling?
No, there was nothing that I observed outside of that realm.
Specifically, messages between Larry and May, did you find any messages between the two of them on Larry's device download from January 13th, 2021?
I did not.
And I believe you did testify that there were some SMS messages that you located in some location between Larry and May.
On the device or on the SMS content?
In any part of your investigation?
Yes, I did.
And where were those?
I observed the text messages through the T-Mobile SMS content file that was provided upon search warrant, and also the information that had been screenshot in the Instagram account showing conversations between Larry and May.
But on the actual cell phone download from January 13th, were there any messages between Larry and May on that phone?
No, there were not.
Were there messages between Larry, the defendant, and other people?
Yes, there were.
Can you describe kind of the volume, or if there were a handful of communication strings between the defendant and other individuals? If you can describe that for us at all.
In what particular, going back to January 8th specifically, or?
Yes, so I guess from January 8th, 2021, and moving backwards in time, let's say to mid 2020, were there text messages on the defendant's device between the defendant and other people?
Yes, there were.
I mean, how many different message strings would you say there were?
Hundreds. It was not. Larry's phone was pretty active as far as message content between people that he were identified through our investigation as being family members on both Larry's side and May's side, as well as co-workers and other people that he was friends with. Yes, there was plenty of messages between those times.
But no messages between the defendant and his wife?
No.
Going back, just I want to clarify one aspect of the Instagram kind of access. When an account is private, is it accurate then to say that in order for a person, so for example, if you had an Instagram account, in order for me to have access to yours, if it's set up to private, I would have to request to follow you. And would you then have to accept my request?
Yes, generally you would because of the account privacy.
And then if you, for example, were following my account do I automatically then have access to yours, or do you still have to accept, kind of take some sort of action to allow the other person to view your account?
Ultimately, the priority is the user settings, but in that essence, you would have to have some sort of exchange in order to grant access and request access. So both parties would have to complete an action to view each other's accounts.
So theoretically, I could follow someone, I could allow someone to view my account, then make a request to follow them, but until they accept that request, I still can't see their account.
That's true.
And then the only other way for one individual to view the contents of another person's Facebook or Instagram account would be to know their password. Is that right?
Yes.
See,
And they would have to typically the way if it's sent up, we call this a two-factor authentication as to logging into the account, is they would normally have to have the device in hand in order to do so. I mean, there's ways that you can access it remotely, but the preferred way to avoid that two-factor authentication or to go through that process would be to have the actual device.
And then, so if one person wanted to see what was on someone else's Instagram account, or Facebook, they'd either need that person to allow them access. So in other words, the user puts in their password and then hands the device to the other individual for them to view. That would be one way, right?
Typically, yes.
The other way would be for the user to give that device to the other person and then allow that person to have the password in order to get into the video.
Yes, if no other actions have been completed prior to that.
What do you mean by that?
As in this, going back to what defense counsel had said on allowing emails and phone numbers or sharing an account, I believe was the phrase, is that without that, you would have to have the person's device. So if you do not have a sharing account set up already, there's no way you'd be able to view the account. If it was private on Instagram, you would have to have permissions, as they would call it.
And was there any indication that Millete had given permissions to the defendant?
Not that I saw.
Now, she also asked you about some kind of different accounts that you interpreted as being like journals, or
Correct.
an opportunity to kind of create journal entries. I believe you testified that this Sailor Moon Instagram account was one such account, correct?
Yes.
And then there were also some emails that May sent to herself in her Yahoo account, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, didn't she, in some of those, actually label or title the email diary?
Yes, she did.
Do you have your report that is related to your analysis of the Yahoo search warrant in front of you?
I do.
Let's take a break. Do you have a lot more questions on reading?
No.
Can we wrap up? Can we keep going? Okay, we'll keep going. Let's wrap up.
And do you specifically recall a date and time of one of those entries?
Where the term diary was used.
Yes.
I'd like to refer to my report just for recollection.
That's why I could refer you to page 31 of your 43-page report, bottom of the page. See if that refreshes your memory.
In that recorded video, she said something about you always wish death on me.
Yes,
She must have just said
And was
that
dated,
before she started
does
recording.
that refresh your memory?
I am refreshed.
Okay. And what was the subject line of one of the emails that referred to the word diary?
Subject was diary 12/22/2020.
And then on the next page, there's some text of your report. Is that the actual text of the body of that email?
Yes, that is the exact verbiage that I found on the email.
And again, that was an email that was sent from Millete to Millete.
That's correct.
Can you just read the last couple of sentences of that entry on page 32?
Yes. Then I decided to keep standing against their wave of self-indulgence and narcissism, and will remain standing to fight for me. Finally, after years of just being an autopilot and spending more time at work to avoid being at home, I've suffered the consequences of my quietness and indifference. It's time to take back my home.
Thank you. There are no other questions.
Recross. Okay. Millete is
Okay.
excused or subject to recall.
He may be excused.
And so that concludes your testimony. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We are in recess. We'll resume.
All right. Well, that witness is excused. They're taking their morning break. Thank you all for being here, by the way. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. Consider becoming a member if you would like for members only perks. You know, as I've been sitting here listening to the testimony, and for those of you who haven't been here for the whole morning, that witness, Detective Grinley, has been on stand the whole morning, and he was on stand yesterday afternoon. And I would say that his testimony, not only the content, but the delivery of the testimony was probably the most powerful I've seen, among the most powerful I've seen. There's been some other powerful testimony, like from her, one of her best friends at work, one of Maya's best friends at work. But his testimony was very powerful because this is where we first learned, it's really confirmed that Maya was indeed having an affair, and that this detective interviewed the gentleman that she was having an affair with, and this gentleman is still alive and well. Yep, I agree, Jessica. And he also testified to a lot of, you know, private social media and general like email account activity going back and forth, both back and forth between Maya and Larry, but also going back and forth between Larry and his boss on the days in question. Basically, there was a lot of traffic around Larry not being at work for a certain amount of days, and people trying to get a hold of him while his phone was, you know, ostensibly off and left at home, and he was taking his child around doing whatever he was doing with Maya. There was also a lot of discussion about the subliminal messages that Larry was attempting to use to control Maya, and how Maya caught those subliminal messages. She specifically asked him in text messages to stop. She told him, you know, she's going to leave him because of these things, that it was wrong. There's the other significance is that Maya had a private Instagram account that she kind of used as a diary and a place to vent, and that was the main account that she used to communicate with her, the guy she was romantically involved with. And in that account, she posted a really sickly looking picture of herself. She looked really sickly in that picture, and saying she thinks that her husband Larry is poisoning her. And then there are log entries from Larry's search history, where he's looking up Rohypnol, which is the roofie drug, which now is called the RAPE drug. He was also looking up the clinical name for Benadryl. So, you know, around the same time that he's looking these things up, she is thinking, you know, she's documenting that she thinks she's being poisoned. It appears also that he was spraying some kind of chemicals around. Maybe this was pheromones. I think somebody in chat actually heard them say that it was pheromones, but I didn't hear that part. So I'm not saying that isn't what it was, but if it was, I mean, that is just, you know, as I sit here and listen to the testimony, I can't help but think of the family, you know, which is in general very private. That they're not the type to air out their dirty laundry. And especially Maya was not the kind of person to air out their dirty laundry. And now they're having to see all this private information between, you know, their loved one who's missing and probably dead, and all the things that she was going through. And, you know, there's probably a little bit of a guilt factor because, you know, even though Maya wasn't saying anything to any of these people, she was, again, very private, and she wasn't talking to her family about everything that was going on exactly. Now they're seeing what she was going through, and it's hard not to think, gosh, I wish I would have seen that. I wish I would have recognized that. I wish I could have known, you know. And it appears that the person who was really the closest to her at the time of her disappearance was, you know, the guy she appeared to be in love with. The detective said that the messages between Larry and this gentleman, Jamie, were very emotional and romantic and sexual. So they clearly had a relationship going. And, but she also vented to him a lot about what she was going through with Larry at home. And the detective testified that Jamie, this guy, was regularly checking on her, because as things started to get closer and closer and closer to the day of her disappearance, things were heating up. And there was a big argument, and it was around January 5th or January 6th, where Larry called the wife of this Jamie, told her about everything, told her an investigation was going to start at work, and that actually started a disagreement between Maya and Jamie, the guy she was dating, because Larry was basically telling lies to this woman that we're getting back to Jamie, and then Jamie's having to confirm them with Larry. So in you know, in the world of narcissistic abuse, that's called triangulation. That's, you know, where you get somebody else involved and spreading, you know, getting on your side and spreading misinformation about that person, isolating that person, getting people to think, you know, badly about them so that they'll think okay of you. I mean, and every single person who has testified has really been consistent about what they're seeing in Maya's state of mind. And as somebody else said very eloquently here, I'm going to read this again. Yeah, Betty. This witness has spent hours, and we're talking about the detective who read through all of her private accounts. This witness has spent hours reading Maya's thoughts and feelings. He probably knows her better than Larry. He has a tender heart and very protective of her, and will want to defend her. That is sweet. Yeah. And I think some of that came out. He's not going over and beyond, above and beyond his scope and the call of duty, but he clearly saw that Larry was being very controlling and domineering, and she felt stifled and desperate. Let's see what Max says here. These types of trials, which a defendant fights against a mountain of evidence, IMO, are more about the defendant using the trial as one last chance to degrade. Exactly. I totally agree. And you know what? The defense attorney is buying right into it, is playing right into that idea of, you know, degrading the victim and her dignity, because she's used every opportunity to, you know, bring in things that would make her look to the to the naked eye, like she was irresponsible and unfaithful, and she had this secret abortion that has not been confirmed. His testimony is powerful because he knows her in and out, because he read her texts and emails. Yeah, there is so much victim blaming, and like, I think as a culture, we're starting to get better about this, but we're still a long way to go, because um, we keep thinking only in terms of these things that she's been doing in reaction to his abuse, really, up to and including an affair. And is it morally okay to have an affair? No, probably not. But it sounds like this was not a secret between Larry and Maya. It was probably just a secret outside of their relationship. It sounds to me like Maya was very clear with this person, with her husband, that she didn't want him anymore. She wasn't in the marriage anymore. So emotionally, she wasn't committed to him anymore. The only reason she was there was for their children. And so he just couldn't accept that. He couldn't accept that and needed to change it so desperately that he goes out and tries to drug her, tries to put messages in her head, tries to get spellcasters. And none of those things worked, obviously. I mean, if you think about it, none of those things that he did worked for him. And so, and he even said in messages to one of the family members that he would sell his soul for this. He was ready to sell his soul. So when you say something like that, you're willing to cross all lines of moral decorum, right? You're willing to do things that you wouldn't normally do because you're that desperate. And as if you can control an outcome by, this is just a simple inability to accept that you can't control another person, that your wife is not your property, that her mind is not your property, that her entire being is not your property. And she had a outside of her life with Larry, she had her own thriving life. She had, her own career. She could probably support herself. She was probably going to have to, if they got divorced and she was looking into this, she was probably going to have to pay child support and alimony to him because she made so much more than him. And it's very sad to think that even though she probably earned most of the money that purchased them the house that they were living in, that she was probably going to be the one leaving the house. And that's sad. That's sad. I mean, she worked so hard for all of those things, and now she's having to give them up because he's so domineering and controlling and doesn't even want to give her access to their bank accounts and to her own money that she's earning. The idea of him letting her get a Jeep and letting her get a motorcycle, toward the end of their marriage, because that's the way you keep a marriage going, right? Is by buying material things, is by bribing. You want to bribe your wife to stay in a marriage by letting her buy things with her own marriage. I mean, just think about how warped that thinking is. Yeah, that's right. It is called financial abuse, Jessica. He committed every kind of abuse. It sounds like she even said in some of her diary entries that he had laid hands on her. It doesn't. There's no evidence that he beat her up, but there were Google searches where she says, if husband lays hands on you, if husband does this, is it, is it considered domestic violence? And, I think we do need to broaden our understanding of what domestic violence is. Domestic violence can be emotional torture. And she was going through emotional torture. I mean, think about if he's giving her these gummy vitamins and she's being drugged, then she's being, then her brain and her functions are being broken down. It breaks everything down. And then I don't know whether subliminal messages work, but what he was trying to do was control her in a way that she did not consent to being controlled. And that's harmful in and of itself. And, you know, who knows? Who knows what else he tried to do? He followed her around. He monitored her every move. He had all these calendar entries saying where she was, whether she was wearing a ring, if she wasn't, if she was wearing a ring, what time it was, who she was with. He clearly followed her to her own workplace and apparently caught her in a truck in the parking lot. I think it might have been with this guy Jamie. So it's really she was being, I consider it, physical abuse when someone's poisoning you, even if that person isn't physically laying their hands on you. They're changing without consent. They're trying to do something to change you. They're using coercive control. They're getting inside of your entire body and brain with drugs. She was abused in every way. And who knows what it was like. I don't even want to think about what it was like sexually. But getting hold on just a sec. Getting back to her family, just I think through what they're having to go through watching all this testimony take place and seeing her messages. And then it was quite jarring hearing the message, hearing them talk to each other, hearing how he was talking to her and making all these assumptions about what she was doing and what she was feeling and how she, belittling her, telling her, oh, he was making his move on you and you didn't even know it. He was making his move and you didn't even know it. And then she's like, you could hear that she's tired and worn out and frustrated. And in the beginning of that recording, you hear her say, you're constantly wishing death on me. So I'm assuming that he had said something to that effect right before she started recording. She was trying to document that this was happening. Many people in our society have a very narrow definition of abuse. Yeah. That ignorance is, this ignorance is part of why victims are isolated and do not have enough support. Slowly things are, yes, they are changing very slowly. It's, things do eventually change, but also sometimes the pendulum swings this way and then it goes back this way a little bit and then it goes this way again in order for the lasting change to stay and for the general body of thought to be moved into that general direction. And it's painful to watch while people try to grapple with this understanding. I don't think of domestic violence in terms of husbands and wives. I think about it in every way, in with children, with anybody who's living together or who's in close proximity or who has a close intimate relationship or some sort of dependent relationship. The closer they are, the more kind of domestic it is. And then depending on the severity of say a verbal abuse, it can cause long-term irreparable damage. Whereas physical abuse is all, I would say physical abuse is both emotionally and physically harmful. But you do, end up finally healing from the physical abuse. It's the emotional toll that goes longer. And so usually if someone's in a kind of relationship where there's physical abuse, there's a lot of emotional abuse wrapped up with that. And why get to the point of, why even allow people to think that everything up to and including everything leading up to physical abuse is an abuse. It is. I want to make sure they're not back and I haven't missed it. No, looks like they're not back. So this just happened to my cuz, but when things got too volatile, instead of him paying her, he did himself away and left her a widow. Oh my God. It's just, people shouldn't have to die in these circumstances, either by self-harm or by, murder. Yeah, and the kids get the worst of it. The kids have to witness it. The kids have to suffer the fallout from whatever it is that comes. A lot of times there's divorce, or there's a very acrimonious marriage or acrimonious divorce, and the kids, someone who is willing to emotionally torture and torment and try to control somebody, they're also willing to use children as pawns in that fight. So they'll get the the kids poisoned against the other party. Parental alienation, that's another form of abuse. It looks like they're coming back. That's another form of abuse, is parental alienation. One family member pitting the other family member against the children or other family members. That's familial alienation. That's essentially what Larry was doing to May with all of his family members, was just constantly picking away. And this was happening, I said in the beginning of when I started covering this, and basically giving the details of the case itself, that you can think of this case in chunks. And 2020 is the marriage difficulty year, the year when things blew up, basically at the start from 2020 to the end of 2020. And 2021 is when Maya went missing. That is Maya missing. So the 2020 is marriage issues. 2021, right at the beginning, is Maya disappearing. And that 2020, 2021, and part of 2022 is just dominated by searching for Maya. And in the very beginning of her going missing, that was intense. It was really, really intense, even on social media and in the media. It was a worldwide media story. And, it would be nice if more people paid attention to this case, because you can learn so much from it.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Peter Villiver.
People call Peter. I think it might be another law enforcement.
Do you solemnly state under penalty of perjury the testimony provided in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Can you please state
Yes, full name's Peter Villiver. First name's Peter, common spelling Peter. Last name's Villiver. That's V as in Victor, ILLA, V as in Victor, ER.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Villiver, what is your current occupation?
Presently, I'm a senior crime and intelligence analyst with the San Diego County District Attorney's Office.
How long have you worked for the district attorney's office?
Approximately 5 years.
What was your assignment prior to your current one?
I was assigned to the Bureau of Investigation.
And what did you do primarily for the Bureau of Investigation?
As an analyst with the Bureau of Investigation, I was assigned to provide technical assistance to active criminal investigations to our prosecutors and district attorney investigators.
And do you, in part, still do that in your current assignment?
As collateral duty, yes.
Essentially, you were promoted?
Transferred.
Okay. And prior to your work at the district attorney's office with the Bureau of Investigations, what did you do?
Before joining the district attorney's office, I used to work for San Diego Police Department.
In what capacity?
Generally the same, however, my clients per se are police officers and detectives.
So when you say the same, what type of work?
Same title, specializing in criminal investigations.
And did that include analysis of cell phone records?
That's my specialty, yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about your training and education that has provided you the background for that specialty?
Yes, so overall, I've been with law enforcement or working for law enforcement as a professional staff for about 12 years cumulatively. Prior to employment with the San Diego Police Department, I used to work as a transportation systems analyst in a private engineering firm. I received my bachelor's in geographic information systems. Also have a bachelor's in government with a focus in research and methodology. And then upon employment with San Diego, upon employment
Information.
with San Diego PD, a focus in research and methodology. And then upon employment with San Diego PD, that's when I received specialized training in the field of cell site analyses and cell phone business records analyses.
And is that an area that you continue to attend trainings, conferences to further your education and your training in the area of cell phone analysis?
Yes, continuous training up to present. And also I facilitate trainings.
Meaning you conduct the trainings yourself?
Yes, as an instructor.
How many times have you testified as an expert in cell phone analysis?
In the past 12 years, approximately 130.
Your Honor, I would offer this witness as an expert in the area of cell phone analysis, and I don't know if counsel has any objection to that.
Is there any objection to the court recognizing Mr. Villiver as an expert in the area of cell phone analysis?
No, Your Honor.
So noted for the record.
And specifically, is your expertise in the area of cell phone analysis as it relates to cell tower locations?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about when you conduct your analysis, where do you start?
Okay, so when I conduct my analyses, a detective or investigator obtains cell phone business records through a legal process, typically a search warrant. And then I would receive the materials electronically. And in addition to that, I would also receive case information pertaining the crime case or the incident. I then evaluate the materials that I receive to make sure that I have all the data sets or data points that I need to conduct my analyses. And then I move forward with the processing of the data.
And when you say the records, are we talking about call detail records?
Call detail records is a primary type of business record that we receive from cell phone companies pursuant to a search warrant. In addition to that, there are other business records that are obtained, such as subscriber detail information, specialized location information, and such.
Let's start with the call detail records. What does that mean? What is the transaction detail that is generated in call detail records?
Yes, so call detail records in summary, it's I receive it in an electronic format. It's similar to our billing records. So it lists transactions such as voice calls, text messages. It has attributes of timestamps, duration, the associated party, meaning who called whom, and those transaction details. However, the call detail records that we get also includes network information that enables us to conduct historical location analyses.
So if I summarize that, the call detail records include records that show the making or receiving of a phone call,
Correct.
the making or receiving of a text message,
That as well.
and to be clear, that would be what is referred to as SMS messages and not iMessages, correct?
Correct. SMS or text messages, excluding iMessages.
Now, are you familiar with the term passive data events?
Yes.
What does that refer to?
So passive data events, for the purpose of my analyses, are transactional details that are recorded by the cell phone companies without the actual use of or active use of the device. So there are passive events that are recorded in this particular case by T-Mobile, where the target device is communicating with the cellular network.
What is that called in the T-Mobile records?
Okay, so there's two passive events that I utilized in this particular investigation. It's the data usage component, so data usage identifies transactional details as well, timestamps, and in some cases, location information. These data usage are generated based on, as a result of applications that are installed on the device. The second passive data usages that I evaluated for this case is called the timing advance, or TDOA.
Timing, can you, TDOA?
TDOA,
Stands for what?
time distance of arrival.
And if you can, just in very simple terms, if possible, explain what is TDOA, a user-generated transaction?
Not necessarily. So these are passive events that are recorded as long as the device is connected to the cellular network. The TDOA gives us timestamps when that relationship occurred, the associated cell site that the target number or target device was communicating with. In addition to that, a very special attribute that it has, it also gives us an estimated distance of how far the device was from the cell tower. So it gives us a little bit more precise indicator of where the device was.
But TDOA is what you would refer to as a passive data event.
It's one of the passive data events, yes.
As opposed to, again, a user making or receiving a call or a text message.
Yes, so compared to the call detail records, it's limited to when the target number receives or makes a voice call or a text message.
And how is TDOA utilized by, for example, T-Mobile in this case?
Yes, so from training and experience, T-Mobile and other cell phone companies have similar types. They just call it differently. They use it for performance measurements.
So kind of explain that.
Yeah, so it's to identify gaps in their network coverages so that they can, moving forward, kind of optimize their network in a specific area.
So T-Mobile essentially sends out a message to the phones in its network to just kind of keep track or test the functionality of their network?
If they have to pull it later to identify gaps, so they would pull TDOA or similar types of records to identify how their customers performed historically.
And you already mentioned this, but you were requested to analyze some cell phone records In this case, specifically for a telephone number associated with Millete,
Yes,
and those were records obtained by, well, is it fair to say that you looked at two sets of records?
I did receive 2 sets of records for generally 2 different timeframes.
And one of those were set of records obtained by investigator Matthew Brindley.
Correct.
And then you also analyzed cell phone records associated with a number associated with the defendant, Larry Millete,
Yes.
and also their 2 daughters.
In total, 4 distinct phone numbers or target numbers associated to the Millete family.
And the first cell phone search warrant return you obtained and reviewed was for what date range?
Generally from December 2020 to January 2021.
And that was a search warrant return for T-Mobile records that was obtained by the Chula Vista Police Department?
In their initial investigation of the case, yes.
And then what was the second search warrant return you reviewed?
The second return, it's more expanded. It's by Mr. Grindley in my office. It covers from January 2020 up to about April 2021.
And is it fair to say that for the time period that overlapped, the records were consistent?
Yes.
The second one just expanded the data set essentially?
Let me clarify that. Yes, there's an overlapping period between the 2 search warrants. However, I just want to highlight that the records that were obtained by Chula Vista Police Department in their initial investigation captured the specialized records TDOA that I mentioned earlier because it has a different retention schedule than call detail records.
So the first set of records did include the TDOA.
The first sets of records by Chula Vista, yes.
And to clarify that further, are you aware that SMS messages were obtained as part of the second set of records?
Yes,
And were those part of the first set?
it was part of the second set, I believe.
But in terms of the cell tower information and the call detail record, the information is consistent between the 2 sets?
Correct.
Did you conduct analysis then of the cell phone number call detail records associated with Millete?
Yes.
And did you then create, after you've conducted your analysis, a PowerPoint to reflect your findings?
Yes. So as part of my analyses, I generate a written report and essentially a PowerPoint containing series of maps that show cell site activities.
Do you recall how many pages your PowerPoint presentation or your slides were for this mapping of Millete cell phone?
It's well over 200.
So for purposes of this hearing, we're not going to go over all of those that you prepared, but just to give us an understanding of the time frame that you captured, what was the search period that you reviewed?
Generally for that particular case, December 2020 all the way to April 2021.
Now, Mary, may I first witness to direct him to Courts Exhibit 22?
Yes.
You should see Courts Exhibit 22-1 in front of you to recognize and kind of flipping through 16 slides. Do you recognize those to be slides that you prepared in connection with this case?
Yes, Courts Exhibit, the 22 series is a 16-page document that contains excerpts of my diagrams that I created for this case.
Okay. And up in the right-hand corner, it looks like there's a red number. Who generated that number?
I generated that.
And so would that be kind of, you had said well over 200 slides. So 1 would be the first slide, 2 would be the second slide, and so forth.
Yes, in that series.
So looking at the first slide then, for example, which will be up on the screen, you created this slide to just, and it's 22-1. Is this the same slide or exhibit that's in the binder?
Yes, I have a printed version of what's currently displayed on the screen.
And this just gives you a summary of, I think, what you just described, which is essentially the area that you conducted your activity analysis for. Again, for the phone associated with me.
With the victim, yes.
And then I'm not going to project slide 22-2, but essentially, what is 22-2?
Okay, so 22-2, I have a printed version of it in front of me, are the phone number associations. Again, the 4 target numbers that I received for this particular case under the kind of the family T-Mobile account. There's 4 phone numbers to it and the name associated to them.
And then you have colors associated on the right for each of those individuals?
Yes, so my demonstratives are color coded. So each specific color represents a specific target number.
So blue for Laura May's phone, red for Larry's phone, pink for Maya's phone, and orange for Milan's.
Correct, consistent throughout my diagrams.
And we're going to now project 22-3. What are we looking at in this exhibit?
Okay, so 22-3 represents a, can I use my laser pointer?
Yes.
Okay, so 22-3 is a representation of a diagram that I generated. It essentially identifies the activated cell sites by the target number on the very top left. I'm pointing at the very top left, T-Mobile 619-227-0558 for the period of December 24th, 2020 up to January 8th, 2021, which was the last transaction that was able to get within my search.
Okay. So essentially all these little purple dots are cell towers that were activated during that time frame by this phone.
Yes.
Looking at 22-4, can you tell us what we're looking at in this exhibit? And again, this is the same as in the binder.
Yes.
So what is this?
Yes. So 22-4 is a overview map of the pertinent location that I received for this particular case. You will see a blue circle with identifier A as an apple, which represents the address of 2413 Paseo Los Gatos in the city of Chula Vista.
Looking at 22-5, what are we looking at in this exhibit?
So 22-5 is another demonstrative of the pertinent location. You will see about in the top right quadrant of the map, push pin identifying the location of 2413 Paseo Los Gatos. But this is a more zoomed in version of the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood in the east side of Chula Vista. It's an oblique terrain model.
And there's a notation down at the bottom, San Miguel Ranch. And can you tell us, what is that indicating?
So San Miguel Ranch is the nomenclature for that community in East Chula Vista.
Looking at 22-6, what are we looking at in this exhibit?
Okay, so 22-6, you will see a series of pink dots. This just identifies the deployed T-Mobile network equipment on or about January 2021. So each dot represents a T-Mobile cell tower or cell site that can provide service to T-Mobile customers primarily.
And you're using the word cell site and cell tower interchangeably?
Yes.
So again, we aren't going to go over all the cell phone activity for any more in the next period, but we would, what I'd like to do is direct your attention to January 7th, 2021 in particular. And looking at 22-7, if we could use this as an example as we move through the slides and just kind of orientate us to what we see in this particular slide.
Yes, 22-7 all the way to the end, we're actually going to be going over the transactions in detail. So the elements of the maps are generally going to be the same. Do you want me to go over the elements of the map?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, at the top left, you will see a black box with the location identifier. So it identifies where the cell sites activated were for this particular diagram. On the top right, you will see a white square with the date for ease of visualization. Most importantly, at the very bottom of the diagram, you will see a table. So the table contains the attributes that I was able to acquire from the call detail records from T-Mobile, starting from the left phone, and it has identifier Maya M, which indicates that this particular transaction was from the phone number associated to the victim. Date and time, self-explanatory, date and time of when the event occurred, adjusted to reflect San Diego time. The direction as it relates to the target phone, it's incoming or outgoing. So if the target phone receives a phone call, it's an incoming, and vice versa. Calling number, called number, these are the phone numbers associated to that transaction. The target number will reflect as one or the other. And then LAC cell ID, these are network identifiers. Latitude and longitude, I just want to be clear, this represents the latitude and longitude of the activated cell tower, not the location of the device. And then the duration, if it's a voice call, it will have a value of 0 and up. If it's a text message, it will have a value of text.
Now, just I'm noting that it says calling number 2300. What does that?
Yes, so those are the short SMS codes, similar to advertisements, notifications of some sort.
And so this, then there's a kind of purple pie in the middle of this. So for this transaction, January 7th at 9:59 a.m., what does the purple or pink pie shape there represent?
Yes, so throughout the diagrams that I generated, the activated cell site is represented by a sector or a piece of a circle. It identifies the location of the cell site. In this particular case, the location of the cell site is right underneath where the label 125 is, which is State Route 125. We also know, based on the records that we received, that this particular cell site faces north, and this sector is derived from a typical three-sector orientation of a cell tower. So this represents a 120-degree sector.
So is the activation of this tower at this time consistent with the phone being at the location of the Millete house?
To include the Millete house, so area north of the cell tower. So generally parts of East Lake San Miguel Ranch neighborhood of East Chula Vista.
And again, you cannot say exactly where the phone is, correct?
Using historical records, primarily the call detail records, we cannot identify the exact location of the device.
But you can say that it's consistent with being in that neighborhood.
In that neighborhood, yes.
So looking at 22-8, does this exhibit reflect 2 telephone calls that were outgoing January 7th, 2021 at 1:16 and then another at 1:40 p.m.?
Yes, again, referencing to the table at the bottom of Courts Exhibit 22-8, 2 transactions generated at 1:16 p.m., an outgoing phone call, and 1:40 p.m., an outgoing phone call.
And using open source documents, did you, are you able to determine the source or those phone numbers?
Yes, those 2 phone numbers were associated to what appears to be like law firms.
So the second call at 1:40 p.m. was to Broad and Law, the number associated with Broad and Law?
619-567-6845. Based on open source search, it's associated to Broad and Law, which is the kind of the excerpt on the left side of the diagram. And then 858-472-4022, which is the excerpt on the right side of the diagram, identifying as Collaborative Practice San Diego.
And then as we move through the
He's a
slides
good
for the
data
afternoon, can you
witness.
kind of just tell us generally, well, and again, the cell tower activation is the same as we saw on the last slide,
Yes,
so consistent with her being at the phone being at the residence.
San Miguel Ranch to include the residents.
And describe for us in your analysis what was the movement of the cell phone that afternoon.
On January 7th, 2021.
Yes.
Yes, on January 7th, 2021, the phone number associated to the victim, in my review of the target numbers, cell site activities, was consistent to the phone being generally in the area of San Miguel Ranch in East Chula Vista. And at some point, approximately mid-afternoon, 3 o'clock or so, it shifts away from East Chula Vista and then ultimately returns back to the area of San Miguel Ranch.
So looking at 22-9, can you tell us what we're looking at in this exhibit?
Yes, so 22-9, it's another transaction. It's at 3:22 p.m. So this particular event was not generated from a voice call or a text message, but it was generated from the TDOA data that I was referring to earlier. The only difference in this particular case, so we still have the timestamps, the phone associations still associated to the victim.
I did not see
on
that.
the. Yeah, there you go. Now it has a estimated distance value. So based on this particular transaction, T-Mobile estimated that at 3:22 p.m. the device was 1.26 miles from the activated cell tower 8877-11.
So would that be consistent with the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood?
So it's consistent, still consistent being in the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood. Now it's also giving us the estimated distance of 1.26 miles, which is approximately where the blue circle identifier labeled A. The sector representations are fixed 1 mile for as represented.
And then in this exhibit, we also see a little blue with the location of a car wash on East Plaza Boulevard and Euclid
Yes,
in National City.
correct.
And did you create that identifier?
Yes, as part of the investigations, I was provided information of pertinent location, a blue circle with label B as a car wash in National City.
And looking at then 22-10, and at the top, just an indication of this time frame being from 4:07 to 4:10 p.m. and describe for us what you saw in terms of the cell phone activity.
Okay, so at 4:07 and at 4:10, 2 different measurements.
Let's note for the record, now you're explaining 2210.
Yes, I'm sorry. 22-10 is the exhibit on the screen. And is that the same exhibit that's in the binder?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So yes, at 4:07 p.m. and 4:10 p.m. is displayed on 22-10. The phone number associated to the victim activates a cell site in National City. So just west of the blue circle letter B, the car wash, and it had recorded estimated distance of 0.24 miles and then 0.10 miles from the activated cell tower.
And if you remember, Maya's little boy
Looking
asked
at
if they could go to the car wash.
22-11, is that exhibit up on the screen the same that's in the binder in front of you?
Yes, 22-11. So at 4:41:03 p.m. and 4:41:50 p.m., the phone number associated to the victim activates a cell site in East Chula Vista. The cell site is southeast of the Paseo Los Gatos address.
Looking at 22-12, is exhibit 22-12 up on the screen the same exhibit that you have in front of you?
Yes, 22-12. This cell site activation was generated from an incoming voice call at 5:48 p.m. from a 442-287-2502 phone number.
And I think that's already been identified as
A lot of
phone
car,
belonging to
Liz, a lot of car
Alexander
washes have
Wash.
fun things inside of
by
them for,
investigator
and they have
Millete.
toys. And sometimes it's
And
fun
again,
for them to
in
go to
terms
the
of
car wash.
cell tower
I think
location
that might have
in
been
relation
why.
to the victim's home, what are you able to determine, if anything?
Okay, so in this particular transaction, it indicates that the phone, when this voice call was generated, was consistent to be in the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood to include the Paseo Los Gatos address.
Were there any other recorded voice call successful connections after this particular transaction?
No, ma'am.
What happens with regard to the phone activity as we move into the early morning of January 8th?
So between the last phone call and to January 8th.
Correct.
Yes, so from the last phone call that we went over up to January 8th, there were location information that indicates that the phone remained in the area of San Miguel Ranch neighborhood of East Chula Vista.
And then just, I'm sorry, for the record, I'm just projected 22-13 up on the screen. Is that the same exhibit that's in front of you?
Yes, 22-13.
And what do we see in this exhibit 22-13?
Okay, so at 1:24 a.m., now moving to January 8th, so a new date per se, we observed that the phone associated to the victim activated a cell site similar to what we've been going over at 1:24 a.m. and 1:25 a.m. Both transactions in the 1 o'clock hour of January 28th estimated that the device was approximately 1.16 miles from the cell tower.
He said 28.
And so these are both, you had said, TDOA sessions?
Yes, they were TDOA transactions.
Now, just to clarify, once again, are those user generated?
No, ma'am.
And what can you tell us about any future or any activity at this point with regard to the victim's cell phone and any TDOA and data usage?
Yes, ma'am. So at the very beginning on page 1 of 22-exhibit 22, I mentioned that I reviewed transactions all the way to April 2021. So about extending up to 3 months after this event. In my review of the phone associated to the victim at 1:25 a.m. on January 8th was the last transaction that included a location or location information for her device.
What does that mean?
Yes, so we talked about the different types of records that I reviewed: passive, events, data usage, and TDOA. We also talked about call detail records of voice and text activities. From my training and experience, when a device stops recording locations, such as TDOA and data usage, it's an indicator that the phone terminated connection from the cellular network. When that happens, we can no longer identify the whereabouts of the device moving forward, or until that device reestablishes connection to the cellular network.
So in other words, if the phone was turned off, if the phone were turned back on, then you
I agree, Betty.
see the phone connecting to the cellular network.
Yes, with the assumption that it remained active subscription.
And
He
so is it fair to
prepared.
say then
He
at 1:25 in
prepared.
the morning on January 8th, 2021, all TDOA and data usage for this particular phone terminated?
Yes.
Could you determine the phone's location at that time?
At 1:24 and 1:25 a.m.
Yes.
as depicted on course exhibit 22-13, the last known location for the device is in the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood of East Chula Vista, to include the 2413 Paseo Los Gatos address.
Is there any indication that at 125 the phone had moved at all from its previous TDOA?
Your Honor, so the two different transactions at 124 and 125 used the same cell site. It had the same characteristic of estimated distance. There were no indicators that the phone shifted in between the two transactions listed in 22-13.
I was asking about earlier. So, for instance, the location from 22-12 when the phone call was made. Is there any change in location?
So 22-12, which is at 5:48 p.m. The day before on January 7th, utilized the same cell site as the one following it. I cannot determine if there were change in location, but it activated the same cell site that is consistent with the phone being in San Miguel Ranch, East Chula Vista.
Is there any activity, any evidence of cellular connection of this phone to the network after January 8th, 2021 at 1:25 in the morning?
Just to clarify, cellular activity with location or any transaction?
Well, is there any transaction with location information after January 7th? I'm sorry, January 8th at 1:25?
January 8th, after January 8th at 1:25, there were no location information that can be obtained for this target.
And 22-14 is up on the screen. And is that what is reflected in this particular exhibit?
Yes, 22-14 is a filler slide that I use in my diagram to indicate such.
Now, did you compare historical cell phone activity for a particular period related to this phone?
Yes, as it pertains to the victim's phone, I then obtained, because we did obtain it from the search warrants, or I evaluated the quote unquote normal usage for this device starting from December 2020 and compared it to the event that occurred on January 8th, 1:25, when the phone ultimately terminated cellular connections.
Did you create a diagram to illustrate your findings?
Yes, I created a histogram to visually depict my findings.
And can you, before I put it up on the screen, because there's a lot of information in it,
Yes.
can you kind of describe what it is that we will see in the histogram?
Yes, in the histogram, you will see essentially a count of transactions per day. So it's a graph. Starting from the left side is December 1st, 2020. So all the counts are aggregated per day. And within all these counts per day, you will see different colors, green, an orange, and a red. Each color represents a characteristic of that voice call. So calls that are outgoing or generated by the target, calls received by the targets or incoming voice calls. And then you will also identify some transactions that were forwarded to voicemail. So incoming, but forwarded to voicemail. So if the user chose not to pick up the phone, it will be forwarded to voicemail.
And then in your histogram, then, is there some distinction between January 7th and January 8th?
Yes, there's a huge distinction on the normal usage, reviewing again about 30 days prior to January 8th. January 8th, 2021, moving forward, all calls or all transactions that were recorded were incoming, forwarded to voicemail, and without location information.
And what does that mean?
It's, again, another piece of indicator that I used to identify that the phone was not connecting to the cellular network.
Which means what?
Which indicates that either the phone is powered off, the phone is perpetually in airplane mode, destructed, essentially there's no communication between the physical device of that user to the cellular network.
And showing you 22-15 up on the screen. Just kind of, again, you had indicated this is a histogram from December 1st, 2020 to January 31st, 2021.
Correct.
Okay. And then just to a little easier to read, each one of these bars that we see that go vertically from bottom to top with different colors, those represent a day.
Yes, so 12/1/2020, I'm referring to the first entry on the far left of the diagram. There's a stack bar with different variables, different characteristics of the voice call. The fourth one that I didn't explain earlier are bars that are reflected in all black.
And what are the bars that are reflected in all black?
Meaning they were all forwarded to voicemail automatically.
Meaning there's no connection to the network?
Meaning that the incoming voice calls were automatically forwarded to voicemail as if the phone could not be reached by T-Mobile.
And so you had already said the green is outbound voice generated by so for example, let's look at December 23rd, 2020.
December 23rd. Yes, the one in the middle.
Yes, the tall one. So green would be what?
Green would be outbound voice calls, meaning the phone number generated those transactions.
Orange is what?
I can read it.
Okay, okay, perfect. We'll move along. And so 22-16 continues through April 22nd, 2021?
Yes. So as I mentioned, I reviewed up all the way to April 22nd, 2021.
Okay. And there's a little orange blip at the bottom of the screen. What does that represent?
Yes. So this is a particular transaction. On my manual review of the data on February 19th, 2021, there was a single transaction that was forwarded to voicemail, but it didn't have location information. So this is a matter of, it wasn't forwarded to voicemail. The target number received a phone call, no cell site locations associated to it. So like an attempt to contact the target number, but was kind of declined before it was even forwarded to voicemail.
So did that change your findings at all that the phone is terminated TDOA and data usage after January 8th, 2021 at 1:25 in the morning?
No, ma'am.
And you're saying it's listed as an incoming call because whoever was making the call hung up before it could go to voicemail?
Yes, Your Honor. On my manual review of that specific transaction, it had a duration of 0 seconds and there's no cell sites associated to that event.
And all the other black bars are calls that did go to voicemail.
That the voicemail service was triggered. So like the introduction was triggered.
But they don't indicate that the phone was, for example, turned on or at all connected to the network.
Correct.
And so if this phone number became active again, in other words,
I agree,
in
Jessica.
March, the phone was turned on, would you then see different colors in your little chart as we move forward?
Yes, from training and experience. Let me backtrack a little bit for that response. In my review of the business records, as of April 22nd, 2021, the phone number associated to the victim was still classified as active, meaning it had an active subscription. If the device reinstates connection in March, there would be indicators that that device reconnects to the network. And with all the voicemails between March and January, there would be several notifications, such as voicemail notification in the period where there's multiple incoming voice calls that were forwarded to voicemail. It's like a push notification. It's like a dump of notification.
You get off of airplane and you move your phone back from airplane mode?
Similar to when you fly out of San Diego to New York, assuming that you turned off your phone or put it on airplane mode throughout the duration of the flight. Once you reestablish connection in New York, assuming people contacted you, then you will have the notifications, voicemails, and such pushed to your device.
So there's no indication that the user of this phone turned on the phone, turned it off of airplane mode, or in any way activated the phone and reconnected to the network.
Starting from January 8th up to the end of my search, no.
And are you familiar with numbers being ported to another carrier?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So numbers being ported to another carrier. So you can keep your phone number, and if you choose to move to another provider, that phone number will then be assigned to that new cellular company.
And is there any indication that this number was ported to another carrier?
There were no indicators, again, as of April 2021, when investigator Grindley obtained this records, it was still listed as active under the Millete account.
And are you familiar with what an eco ATM is?
Yes.
What is that?
So eco ATM is a pawn service for cellular mobile devices. You can go to Ralph's or Albertsons and find those kiosks where individuals can sell mobile devices.
Is there any indication that the device associated with Millete's phone number was found, pawned, sold?
That was one of my first checks, is to identify if the device associated to the victim, which was utilized in January 7th, was at some point sold to one of these kiosks, and the return said no.
Is there any indication the phone had been out of the country since January 7th, 2021?
There were no indicators based on the characteristics of voice calls that I observed in my review.
Can we go back to how you made that determination that there was no proof that the device was sold? I made contact with the Eco ATM. They have a law enforcement service. I have what we call the IMEI, or the unique identifier of the device that the victim's phone number was using on January 7th. So using this IMEI, concept of IMEI is similar to a vehicle's VIN number. It's unique to that specific device. Eco ATM, under normal procedures, check IMEI. And if this IMEI was sold into one of their kiosks, I can, in my inquiry, would give that hint.
And I think you had just answered the question about any indication in your analysis of the phone records, whether or not the phone had been out of the country since January 7th. And what was your answer?
The answer is no, given the findings of my review.
Now, did you also conduct analysis of a cell phone associated with the defendant, Millete?
Yes, it's another T-Mobile phone number associated to the defendant in this case.
And did you create slides and a mapping analysis similar to the slides that we just went through for Millete?
Yes, I generated the same type of diagram, same methodology for this particular target number.
Okay. And for today's purposes for this hearing, we're going to review, and in your analysis, you looked at January 7th, 2021 to January 8th, 2021.
In this particular mapping period, yes.
So showing you 23-1 up on the screen. This is sort of your title page of your mapping analysis.
Yes, 23-1 is the cover page of my report.
And again, similar to what we saw before, you mapped the cell tower and phone activity for Larry Millete's phone on January 7th, 2021?
Yes, so 23-2 is a summary map that covers 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. So we don't have to itemize every single transaction. There were 158 data points for this particular period. And similarly, based on the TDOA characteristics and cell site activities, the phone was consistent to be in the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood. East Chula Vista.
From what time period?
12 a.m. to 12 p.m. as depicted on the top left or the top header of 23-2.
And then looking at 23-3, what time frame does this summary map cover?
Okay, so this depicts moving to the next day, January 8th, 2020 at 12 a.m. to 6:35 a.m. on January 8th, 2020.
And what were you able to determine in terms of a summary of the location of that cell phone during that time frame?
So overall, the TDOA transactions indicate that the phone was in the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood, East Chula Vista, within that 6.5 hour period on January 8th, 2020.
And then looking ahead at 23-4, which is currently up on the screen, is that, can you tell us what we're looking at in this particular map?
Yes, so just to clarify again, Courts Exhibit 23 is an excerpt of my entire diagram. This specifically on 23-4 reflects a phone activity that was generated from the defendant's device on January 8, 2021 at 6:33 a.m., activating the same similarly observed cell tower in East Chula Vista facing north towards the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood.
And so this was an outgoing phone call to a number associated with Kathy Fredericks.
Yes, Kathy Fredericks being information that I received from the detectives.
And that cell tower was, what did it indicate to you in terms of location of the defendant's phone?
This 6:33 call?
Yes.
Yes, this indicates to me that the phone was in the San Miguel Ranch neighborhood of East Chula Vista, which is corroborated by other TDOA transactions around this time as well.
After that phone call, what were your observations regarding the cell phone activity of the defendant's phone?
So after this phone call, a few minutes later, on or about 6:35, again, referring to the passive events that I mentioned earlier, all passive events terminated all the way to approximately 6:33 p.m. on the same day. So an absence of about 12 hours approximately.
And 23-5 is a slide that's up on the screen. Is that a slide that you created to reflect what you've just described?
Yes, 23-5, again, it's a filler slide of my findings that indicates that between 6:35 a.m. on January 8, 2020 to 6:33 p.m. on the same day, January 8, 2020, there were no transactions with cell site locations for the defendant's phone, and the whereabouts of the device could not be determined.
And is that actually January 8, 2021?
I'm sorry, yes, January 8, 2021.
And so what does that tell us about the phone, the device, January 8, 2021 from 6:35 a.m. to 6:33 p.m.?
Yes, so referring specifically to the cell site activities, it terminates, and it has the same characteristics that I defined earlier when we were going over the victim's phone. So within this 12-hour period, it's indicative that the defendant's phone was not connecting to cellular network. However, within the 12-hour period, there were other recorded transactions that didn't necessarily generate locations, but incoming voice calls and such.
Okay. We're going to recess now for lunch. Okay. All right. We're going to recess. We'll resume at 1:30, sir. You're ordered back at that time.
All right. Well, that testimony was a bit, tedious and technical and a bit dry, but it was important. It was showing that even when they were basically explaining she's 78 years old. That seems, if she's 78 years old, she looks pretty dang good for being 78 years old. That's my first response. But and I think that one of the reasons that she probably didn't object during that last testimony is because she's out of her technical depth. Like, she doesn't quite understand those things. I also don't know what she could have objected to was technical data. And so we'll see what she comes up with in her cross-examination, but it was important testimony because it was showing that even when the phone is not being used proactively by a user, it will ping cell data. It will ping a cell tower. So if I'm near a cell tower, even if I'm not using it, it'll ping it. It'll activate there somehow. So, and what they showed is that her phone just completely stopped connecting to any cell tower after 1:26 a.m. I think it is on January 8th. At a certain point, he said it was, well, I'm going to be shutting this down soon, Green Eyes, so that we can come back at 1:30 for the afternoon. But I'm just, basically summarizing that even though that testimony might have been a little bit technical and dry, it was important. More important it was more testimony and validation and confirmation that there's no proof of life after a certain time of Maya Millete. And you would think that, since she was talking about leaving her husband, not her entire life, she wasn't talking about leaving, everybody in the world. She was talking about leaving Larry. And, in the mind of Larry, that means you don't exist, right? If I don't exist in your world, you don't exist in his mind. And so because she could have, they're trying to say that she could, as a matter of character, just disappear herself without any phone, without any money, without any clothes, without, any contact whatsoever with all the people that she loved before, including her own children. So this is just more confirmation of that fact that there's no proof of life after that time. So anyway, I will start things back up at 1:30. I hope you all have a lovely break. Thank you all for being here. Please remember to hit the thumbs up, consider becoming a member, all of that good jazz. And I will see you later with Bolane. Bye.